So, Skull Merchant's getting buffed. As you can imagine, I reacted very normally to this information.
Yes, baby! No boss vulnerability!
Yeah, the new community stream had a nice chunky segment dedicated to showing off some number buffs to the Skull Merchant, which she has direly needed as the worst killer in the game, since she was summarily executed in patch 8.3.0 a year ago. She spent the past year bunking with Trapper in the doldrums of D tier, and only avoided the Spotter being the worst killer in the game up until January when Freddy's rework made him actually decent for the first time in ages. She's been spectacularly and conspicuously terrible for a year, and that was by design. Her DC and kill rates were just too high, and the player complaints were too loud, so they shot her in the back of the head with the promise of a rework in the second half of 2025. I don't know if you might have noticed, but we are in the second half of 2025 right now, and the closest we came to a Skull Merchant rework was a pair of design previews we got earlier in the year that had to get ejected into space as a matter of public safety. I'm just going to take this moment to be a little bit smug here, because I remember all the people telling me how cool it was going to be to have Skull Merchant's drones flying around over pallets and windows and dashing into people, and then Krasu's head form started flying over pallets and windows and dashing into people, and they all stopped thinking that pretty quickly. I'm still thanking my lucky stars that we killed that rework in the cradle. I always called it 5 flying victors, but it could just easily have been 5 remote control Krasu heads that don't have to infect you first, and truth be told, I'm not sure which one is worse. But enough about what we almost got, let's talk about what we are getting. What's coming on the PTB on November the 4th is a series of numbers adjustments to the Skull Merchant. They're pretty much changing nothing from a mechanical perspective. This isn't a rework of any sort, but it's a solid set of number buffs in the vein of what you'd expect for most killers to get when they receive regular balance updates. Except the Skull Merchant is not most killers. Between her year in the D-tier dungeons and the looming threat of a rework feeling like the sword of Damocles over her head, her popularity has never been lower. And I guess this is where I come in, because not a lot of players are very familiar with this killer. They don't know her well enough to know whether these buffs are a good thing or not, what kind of impact they'll have on her balance state, and whether they're good enough that she'll even need a rework at all. So we probably ought to figure that out together, right? Welcome, friends and foes, survivors and killers. Let's sit around the campfire together and talk once more about the Skull Merchant. The first thing I'm sure you're all wondering is what exactly are they changing about her and when? As to when, the answer is pretty simple. Patch 9.3.0, the Sinister Grace mid-chapter, will be reaching the PTB on November the 4th, presumably getting ready for a live release 3 weeks after that, on November the 25th. The PTB will have a shitload more changes, quality of life and UX improvements, and another attempt at anti-tunnel, slug, and camping measures, which, if I have enough insights and interesting things to say about them, might get their own video when the PTB arrives in early November. But Merchant right now is my priority, as I'm sure nobody will be surprised by. My Cliff's Notes here: these PTB changes seem alright. They're nothing groundbreaking, she's not going to be 4K3ing Eternal anytime soon, but there's some pretty decent numbers adjustments that most Merchant players will welcome, or at least notice sometimes, and it will provide a good foundation to build a quality rework on top of. I'll let designer Jeff tell you exactly what's being changed in his own words.
So they'll rotate 10 degrees faster per second. We have increased the hindered penalty for getting scanned to 10%. It was 8% on live. We've decreased the cooldown to deploying your drones. So on live it's 10 seconds, now it'll be 7. And consequently, to make sure that you don't stay undetectable for the entire match, we'll reduce the undetectable duration just a little bit so that it falls in line. We have removed the fast vault immunity to scan lines. And then the last thing, this is a bit of a new one-ish kinda. In the original design of Skull Merchant, when we updated her the first time after her initial release, I'm pretty sure, protection against survivors who would try to grief the Skull Merchant by standing underneath her drones, which is that if you stay underneath the drone, you would get a claw trap almost instantly. And then this is finally what I was talking about. As you can see on the left side, Dwight will get the claw trap instantly from staying under the drone. And on the right, you can see you have the scan feedback that you would get from a scan line, which is telling you it's building up. And then after the 3 stacks have been reached, you get the claw trap.
The first thing you'll notice in these PTB changes is that many of them might look quite familiar. 95 degrees per second going up to 105 degrees per second looks suspiciously similar to Prototype Rotor, the very rare add-on for the killer that changes rotation speed from 95 to 104.5 degrees per second. Similarly, the hinder on claw trap scans, going from 8% to 10%, is identical to the effect of Vital Targeting Processor. Or if you'd rather look at it that way, it's a revert to her pre-nerf hinder value because she had 10% base kit before the truckload of nerfs hit. And fast vault immunity being removed is also a revert from an unnecessary nerf that she got last year, which means that a lot of the changes she's getting, or at least the ones that impact the chase, aren't exactly new. It's why I don't feel the need to wait for a PTB to test them, because I can test the most important PTB changes by just equipping Vital Targeting Processor and Prototype Rotor in my live matches now. And I played Merchant without fast vault immunity in her kit for a year, so I know how she plays when she doesn't have it. After these changes, her chase is not going to feel meaningfully different than it is now most of the time, to the point that I think most survivors playing against her will barely notice it, except maybe fast vault immunity being gone. The more unprecedented changes are the cooldown undetectable adjustments, the killer's collision with her own drones changing, and the tweak to the anti-hostage mechanic. The change to drone collision is pure quality of life. Actual quality of life, not whatever the hell 9.2.0 pretended was quality of life. It will feel good if you find yourself placing a drone slightly wrong, or if you're in a tight space where you don't have the room to give the drone a little bit of distance away from where you're chasing, but it's not what I would call a game changer. The change to the hostage holding mechanic is designed to remove stomp tech, which is where you would place a drone at the bottom of a drop down and the survivor would get claw trapped in the stagger animation as they landed on top of it, and couldn't get clear of the drone in time. This makes a lot of maps like Garden of Joy and Gideon that would otherwise be really rough for you a bit more manageable, and I will be sad to see it go, but I can't say I'm too surprised. It was very unintuitive for survivors to go against, and while I would personally have kept it, I can't really argue with them removing it beyond, I like using it, my killer is very bad, so let me keep it because it makes my killer marginally less bad. On her really awful maps anyway. The most discussion-worthy change here, though, is the joint reduction of her undetectable duration and power cooldown. The drone deployment cooldown going to 7 seconds seems like a good change, makes it shorter than Blight's fucking recharge, you know? But a lot of people were confused when her undetectable duration dropped with it, from 8 seconds to 6. Jeff addressed this in the stream. If you make her undetectable last as long as it does on live while reducing the drone deployment cooldown, her undetectable uptime becomes basically constant. Which is why low power mode got reworked back in the olden days. One thing that's worth noting here is that Merchant's TR does not disappear immediately when a drone is deployed. It fades out and back in again, meaning that the actual period in which she has no terror radius is much shorter than this displayed number in the power description. Clearly this is a problem behaviour will always run into when trying to rebalance Merchant's cooldown and stealth. The undetectable and cooldown are tied to the same button, meaning you have to nerf the undetectable whenever you buff the cooldown, and the fade out means the undetectable will always be shorter than it's meant to be. You could ditch the fade out, but then the cooldown has to remain long to stop the instant undetectable being too easy to spam. It is a sticky wicket, and behaviour might have accidentally nerfed the killer when trying to buff her because of it. It is an awkward fix, but fear not, because I have a solution to the problem. One I've been suggesting for a little while now, but there's never been a better time to move the undetectable condition away from deploying a drone. Consider the following, as a change from the PTB to live. Instead of gaining undetectable when you deploy a drone, how about you gain it when recalling one? What I'm picturing here is this. You deploy a drone, it does drone things for a little bit until you recall it, and then you get undetectable for 10, maybe 15 seconds, or until you deploy your next drone, which immediately shuts off your undetectable and prevents you from regaining it for a few seconds. This way, your stealth is uncoupled from the power cooldown, so you can reduce the cooldown to even shorter than 7 seconds if you wanted to, without worrying about breaking her stealth, or perhaps even remove it altogether. Trapper and Hag don't have deployment cooldowns on their traps, why should Skull Merchant have one? This would also make the undetectable very convenient to use, because instead of getting undetectable when you're setting your traps up and you can't use it, you can very intentionally get it when you need it at the cost of some of your map pressure. Your undetectable becomes much more reliable as an ambush tool without just giving you infinite stealth, and your drone cooldown use can now be as fluid as you want it to be, without worrying about breaking the mathematics on your stealth duration. This seems to be the only change I would make from PTB to live release. Everything else is about as good as it's going to get. Which brings me to the $1 million question. If these numbers adjustments are mostly as good as it's going to get without actually reworking her, are these buffs good enough that she no longer needs the rework at all? Designer Jeff clearly thought so, or at least really hoped so.
Are these buffs that you just went through for Skull Merchant in place of her rework?
So they are not. However, if they end up having like a good outcome for her where players are satisfied, because again, I need to remind everyone, like, everything that we do is for the players, and so if the players are happy, then we're happy. And I think that's the goal. So if we put those changes in the next PTB and players are happy and the feedback that we get is positive, that's a good first step. And I think the next step after that would be to look at the data, right? Because player feedback is one thing, but the data is another. So if everyone, says that she's, for example, super strong, but the data just says that she's not, then there's probably something where we need to reconcile the two. But the next step would be to look at the data. And then I think after that, we could probably make a better decision about the next steps. But ultimately, it really comes down to the feedback that we get. If it's really, really positive and you guys are happy, then we're happy.
So let's ask the question, will these buffs be enough to make Merchant no longer needing a rework? Let me answer this question with as much dignity and respect as I can. No, not even particularly close. These changes are an improvement for sure, but she will be a very weak killer all the same, and well below what the devs and players should consider reasonable for a killer's strength. Let's not forget, she wasn't even good before they nerfed her into the ground. She was a high C-tier killer that received 8 mostly uncompensated nerfs, and this set of changes is a revert to some of those nerfs, alongside some side grades and quality of life changes. She is still gonna really suck, just a bit less than she did before. Of course, this is not on the PTB yet and won't be until the 4th, but given how non-transformative these changes are, I don't think my opinion is gonna change until we do get that PTB on November the 4th. Actually, I'll make a bet on it. I'll tell you what, give me a second. These right here are the frozen mice that I feed to my pet snake Cassie. I would get her out right now, but unfortunately she's in blue. She's only just started to do her, to shed her skin. So I don't want to disturb her while she's doing that. She's pretty busy. But yeah, these mice, these are what I feed her. If these merchant changes on the PTB succeed in making her actually a strong killer, not just okay, but strong, I will defrost one of these and eat it myself live on camera. And that's a promise, because it should be obvious to anyone that these are relatively small buffs to a killer who needs a lot more than relatively small buffs. As temporary fixes to keep the killer playable until this rework comes, they get the job done, I guess. For a skilled merchant player who's good at beam manipulation, these will feel a little bit similar to how she was before the Great Nerfening. Still worse than she was back then, but noticeably better than she was before the PTB. But again, even before her execution, she was on the weak side. Widely considered low B to high C tier at best. And her incredibly high kill rates were down to her being very easy to play and very common to DC against. 2 things that aren't factors these days, and still won't be if the PTB buffs make it to live. If your goal is to make Merchant a good killer with these changes, you have failed, and by quite a long shot, I'm afraid. So what can we do to make Merchant a good killer like she should be? Let me start by asking you a very simple question. Have you ever been to Nando's? For those who don't know, Nando's is a chicken restaurant that's all over the world but very popular in the UK, where the chicken they serve is cooked in a variety of sauces measured on this chili pepper scale, and you can order your chicken based on how spicy you want it to be. You can get these little flags stuck in it to let you know what sauce it's cooked in. I'm thinking of these merchant changes like they're being served to us on the chili pepper scale, and the pre-PTB merchant is terminally unseasoned. There's some chicken there and it can fill you up, I guess, but if you're going to eat here, you want chicken with something resembling flavour on it, so getting it unseasoned is a bit of a scam. These PTB changes garnish that chicken with a bit of lemon and herb dressing. It's nice. It's an improvement over the totally plain stuff that we had before, but it's still quite underwhelming and not really what you come here for. It's an improvement in the abstract sense, but in practice she's really still quite bad. Bad enough that a lot of players will not even notice she got buffed. She's significantly worse than she was when she was on the bad side of mediocre a year ago, and she will still need a rework. But these are good steps, and with the correct changes you can build on this foundation. Make something stronger that feels better to play and play against. From where I'm standing, you don't have to do that much to cook up a spicy and flavourful meal that will be worth all this frustration that us merchant players have had to deal with over the years. Let's slide up this chili scale a bit and talk about the most glaring issue that merchant has that a rework can fix. Her hinder. That hinder value at 10% is enough to feel impactful to use some of the time. Definitely less so now that every map has 35 fucking pallets on it, but it's all she's got once the survivor is claw trapped, and buffing that number is better than nothing. Getting her hinder value right is the biggest friction point for her power. If that number is too low, the killer is completely toothless, because she's just a less efficient legion at that point. But if it's too high, then you're going to start to hear screaming and the sounds of melting flesh from certain members of this community. 10% hinder is pretty bad. It is worse than clowns, and he doesn't have to work anywhere near as hard to get it. But if you bring it much higher, it feels awful to go against, and the madding crowd will start, well, madding even louder than they already were. This is a power element that you can't really balance, and I've been saying this for years now. More than anything, the hinder has to go. It is the biggest bottleneck in her kit, and if there is any reason to rework her, this should be it. And the best bit is you've already come up with a solution to this problem that everyone agreed was good. The drone buddy and EMP dart system from the second design preview. You know as well as I do, everyone liked that system. You yourselves highlighted it as a priority to keep for once you get reworked, so just do it already. I guarantee, if alongside the rotation speed buff and fast volt immunity being reverted, the EMP dart system was packaged into this PTB instead of the hinder buff, most people would have been very happy and much of the community would think she'd be okay, or at least wouldn't demand anything else. So I consider this a bare minimum to expect to get this killer up to standard. It's a popular feature, it would make going against her more intuitive, it would make her stronger, it would be a new form of skill expression, and it would still be a lot of fun to use while letting us keep the drone rotation and stat management wizardry gameplay that we all know and love. That would be a happy medium between her PTB state and the design previews that we were shown a little while ago that we could hopefully get to without going to too much effort. You guys have made a million projectiles by now, I'm confident this one wouldn't be too challenging. But what if we got a little bit spicier? What if we got a little hotter and wanted to make further adjustments to accomplish another one of your design preview objectives, making the killer more effective at a trapping playstyle? You said you wanted to do that, and I agree, we should be building towards that, and the changes that you suggested don't help with that, other than the reduced deployment cooldown, I guess. But if you want this killer to be a trap killer like I do, the only way you can encourage that is by bringing back stealth mode. And before the screaming and melting flash starts, I agree that stealth mode with full invisibility and 2 beams was awkward for survivors to effectively keep track of, and more importantly, made it very hard to learn to play against the killer. It wasn't really a balance issue, but it definitely felt bad if you didn't understand the killer intimately. But now that we're at 1 beam, I think we can compromise using the short stubby beam from the first design preview. If drones deployed in stealth mode and use that little stubby beam to indicate the direction the beam is facing, it helps survivors who are paying attention figure out where the beam is pointing to, at a glance without needing to squint at the drone's housing for a clue. But it still punishes survivors who don't pay attention and get reckless around a trapped area. The stubby little beam as an indicator for a stealth mode drone is basically the only feature from the design previews that actually worked apart from the EMP dart, so it feels like a natural way to bring back stealth mode that's less overwhelming for survivors to understand. In terms of the beam's behaviour in stealth mode, you could either have the drone rotate at full speed while in stealth mode to keep it consistent with scouting mode, or you could do what I've been suggesting for years and make stealth mode drones not rotate at all, to encourage laser tagging in chase and to allow the drones to function like tripwires and place in the environment as traps. You could even do a toggle if you wanted, where you activate a drone in stealth mode and then manually put it into scouting mode yourself after a little bit if you wanted the killer to have more control over it. Or you could just switch it back to where she was before the gutting, where a drone always deploys in stealth mode and becomes a scouting drone after a survivor triggers it for the first time. Whatever you choose to do, she would be a far more effective trap killer and fulfill the kind of Skull Merchant fantasy more effectively if stealth mode was restored in some capacity. And using the little stubby beam indicator from the first design preview would be a great way to do that while still giving survivors enough room to figure out the drone's behaviour at a glance. That would be a pretty hot change, on top of the EMP dart system, I think. But now we're near the top of the chili, and here's where more design-intensive solutions with bigger scopes start popping up. We run into the bandwidth issues that Jeff was talking about. The super ambitious design changes like moving drones and the crash and burn system and the global tracking power, that's the kind of major overhaul behaviour tried to do months ago, and completely fucked it. They did not have the time or the capacity to make something on that scale, even if it works, which it didn't. And I was relieved to see Jeff on the livestream acknowledging this issue when it came time to talk about Merchant.
So as you know, we had a design preview with beautiful stick figures, that I drew myself, about the Skull Merchant and our plans with her and what we would like to do and all that stuff, and we gathered a lot of feedback. So we took that feedback and we made changes to the proposal that we had last. And we went through the process of scoping the proposed design, and what scoping is that each of the departments look at the design, and we identify the tasks that are required, and then we see how many man days are required to complete that design.
How many Mandy's?
I knew it. I knew you were going to say something.
Man days.
I'm
man
helping.
days. In its current form, it is bigger than anticipated from a technical standpoint. There's a lot of technicalities in the way that it needs to be built, and we're busting our budget, basically, in terms of like man days that we can afford. So, what's next? Well, we have identified portions of the design that we could change, whether that's cutting it, whether that's, making them smaller. So we have a plan. However, we ask ourselves, what if the small tweaks that we do in the next PTB bring her to a good enough spot where players are happy and, we see that it helps her in terms of kill rate and DC rate and all that? Like, that's something we have to consider. So assuming that the next PTB goes well and that those changes are well received and that, everything is good, we could use the resources for other more pressing matters. What those are, I'm not sure, because those are discussions that happen outside of my expertise, but that is a possibility.
Maybe some dishes is a little too spicy for Canadians. The PTB changes for the Skull Merchant are definitely appreciated. They'll be enough to tide us over until the rework comes and will provide a stable foundation to build features and changes on top of, to make this killer the best version of herself that she can be. But a good solid base to build a rework on top of is not the same thing as a good replacement for a rework. Even if these numbers changes are souped up between PTB and live, the killer will not be in the best spot she could be in, not even close. She'll still be very bad, and if you buff things like the Hinder to try to fix that, she'll become awful to go against, and that's clearly the last thing you want. That's why you gutted her in the first place after all. Here's the way forward in my opinion. The lock-on, stack and beam control system is basically as good as you're going to get it now. Beam control is going to feel silky smooth with the increased speed, and dropping fast volt immunity is going to feel great as well. All you need to do from PTB to live is uncouple the undetectable duration from the drone deployment cooldown, so that you can shorten the cooldown even more, or remove it altogether if you wanted to, while keeping the undetectable duration nice and long, without risking giving her infinite undetectable. Once this is live, we build everything that's left to rework around this successful and functional lock-on system. And we get the killer shipshape by taking another shot at old features that got nerfed out of her, or by building on the best parts of those two design previews. The EMP dart and drone buddy system from the second design preview should be a core part of this. Again, she needs her lethality on claw-trapped survivors improved if she's going to be a decent killer, but needs to be improved in a skill-expressive way, obviously. And when the EMP dart and drone buddy were previewed, they were immensely popular solutions to this problem. So that system should be a top priority. Additionally, reintroducing stealth mode with that little stubby beam from the first design preview would be a great compromise between her current state of full beam visibility and her old state with zero beam visibility. it would help her be an effective trap killer again, while providing better feedback for the survivors who are paying attention than the old stealth mode gave you. These features should be within scope for a rework going forwards because they're all features that you've designed or at least proposed before. Stealth mode was a thing for a year before you got rid of it, so you could just, give it back. The stubby beam was actually a bug that she had for a while, so you could integrate that into her intended kit as an indicator for a stealth mode beam's direction. And the EMP dart shouldn't be too hard to make because you guys have made a million projectiles throughout the years. Hell, you've made unique projectiles for event modes before. Making one more that works on claw trap survivors seems entirely within scope to me. Even the tripwire direction, if you want to take that route with stealth mode, is currently on one of her add-ons. It's something that you have done before and should be very easy to test. I don't know what kind of scope you had in mind, what resources you have to rework this killer, but I don't think anything I'm suggesting here is too unreasonable. It builds on the existing power and its changes that are coming on the PTB, removes the hinder which everyone fucking hates, and switches it out for old features or proposed features that were received well, that make the killer special and should make her more fun and skill expressive to play and play against if integrated correctly. Change undetectable between PTB and live. That's a manageable change. Focus on getting the EMP dart and some version of stealth mode out and ready for a future update in 6-9 months, however long it would take. Ship it to a PTB with an add-on pass and I think we're there. Bish bash bosh, job done, everybody's happy. So yeah, closing thoughts. These PTB changes are a step in the right direction. We are not at our destination yet, but this is the biggest step in a while towards getting this killer where she needs to be. And they're a reminder that the devs haven't completely forgotten about the Skull Merchant. And I just want to express my appreciation here because watching that stream, I genuinely felt like I'd been heard. Like the work I've put into giving feedback, making my videos, and trying to get the best for the Skull Merchant wasn't wasted. Watching that dev stream and listening to what Jeff had to say, bringing up issues like the scope of the designs and Merchant losing her identity that made her appealing to her players. These were all points that I brought up in my videos on the design previews and the State of Skull Merchant video I made afterwards.
Any killer update that we do from a design standpoint or game standpoint comes with risks, right? We have a dedicated fan base for the Skull Merchant and they love her as she is, and they would really like her to stay as close as possible to what she currently is. And that's very fair and valid. And then on the other end, you have players who absolutely do not like her. Mm-hmm. And with an update, we have the goal of pleasing as many people as we can, but there is a risk that we miss our mark. And so then we have, pissed off and lost all the dedicated Skull Merchant mains, but we've also not achieved our goal of bringing more people in. Yeah. So that's why we're looking at our options based on the feedback that we'll get. And of course, when we know more, we will let you guys know.
It really felt like he was reading off my script, that my concerns and the concerns of the Merchant fans who watch my videos were actually being listened to and understood. I couldn't wish for anything better. So, I gotta say thank you to Jeff and the other designers who've been working on Merchant-related stuff for this past year for, giving a shit. And listening to what I had to say about this killer I love so much. This community stream restored a lot of faith I had lost in you guys about Merchant and a load more stuff too. And I'm looking forward to seeing you bring the Skull Merchant rework over the finish line. Hell, I'll come to Montreal, pick Jeff up onto my shoulders and carry him over that finish line myself if I have to. Because you guys are so close to nailing it with this killer. All the notes are there. You just gotta play them in the right order. Thanks as well to the community managers, especially Mandy and Ryan, for being a key part of this feedback process. It definitely can't be easy to sift through all the gunk on DBD, Twitter and Reddit and YouTube and everything to find what you need for feedback, especially on a killer with such a colourful and divisive history as the Skull Merchant. So thanks for helping this process along. You guys have smashed it. But there's one more group of people I'd like to thank, and that's you. The Merchant players who've boosted my videos and trusted me to advocate for their interests and speak on their behalf. When I was watching that stream, the chat lit up with people mentioning me in real time. My Twitter notifications and Discord tags blew up, and I started getting comments on my YouTube videos too. The fires of Gondor were lit, because when the devs mention Merchant, people think of me, and that's awesome. So if you've been watching at any point in my descent into Skull Merchant related insanity, thank you so much for helping me make what I make, because I certainly wouldn't be able to advocate for the Skull Merchant community in a meaningful way without my shooters. You guys have been so fantastic, and hopefully this whole sorry saga will come to a satisfying end soon. On that note, I've got to go mist Cassie's vivarium. Gotta keep it nice and misty and humid for her so that that shed comes off clean. So I mean it when I say, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Ta-ta for now.